Praise God. God is good, isn't He? Uh, I thought I would take the opportunity of recording my testimony and then putting it up onto YouTube. I know it's around the web and scattered here and there, but I'm up in my study. I was spending some time with God and reading the Word, and I just felt impressed to share it again. Maybe to bring someone hope, but most importantly, to bring the Lord Jesus Christ all the glory. Well, let me start at the beginning. My name's Brian Madden, and I was born in North Belfast, in a place called Tigers Bay. Well, I was actually born in 140 Limestone Road, which is about, Tigers Bay was originally Mackey Street, and 140 Limestone Road was beside Newington Church, about 200 yards from Mackey Street, so I probably qualify as an original Tigers Bay man. I was the second eldest in a family of, let me work this out now, there's me, two brothers and two sisters. That makes five, doesn't it? Second eldest in a family of five. I have two other brothers and two sisters. And growing up in Tigers Bay was a difficult time for us all, because we grew up, I was born in 1967, and we grew up at the start of the Troubles and then lived right through the Troubles. So at a very early age, I remember when we lived on top of the Dunkern Gardens. We lived in a little flat on the top of the Dunkern Gardens, and I remember as a young child when we were forced out of our flat because we were Protestant. And I can remember very vividly in my mind being taken out of that flat, not really understanding why. I went to Cliftonville Primary School, and I can remember the army had to escort us down to the flats at times because we got vile abuse. Probably one of the stark reminders as a young man in P1 in Cliftonville Primary School was when a petrol bomb hit the window and started to burn a curtain. I remember that also. You always remember the most vivid times in your young life. Shortly after that, my mum moved me to Curry Primary School. We were immediately transferred, and around about the same time we were forced out of our home. And I can remember coming down to Dunkern Gardens, and some of the old women, the way I could put it to be as kind to them, these were the type of people who my mum used to send. They lived in big houses. My mum used to send me down to, when you got a hole in your jeans, to get them to patch the jeans or if you needed something stitched up, they had all the sewing machines and they would have stitched it up. And they were always very kind and very nice to us. And I used to go down. I used to be the one that wanted to go down with the treasures and stuff, because they give you little lollipops, and I used to always love to get one. But I can remember when the co-op removal van was coming. It was a guy called Tom Turner who worked in the co-op, and he brought his van, and we were putting our stuff in the van. I remember these same women that were once very kind to me as a young child, shouting abuse at us and telling us not to come back. And I guess as a young man, I couldn't really fully, a young child, I couldn't really understand that. I remember we moved into 126 Limestone Road, and I didn't really want to move because I liked the flat. It was a nice flat. It was warm. It was on the top floor. There was a nice view. And we went into these big houses in the Limestone Road, and they were absolutely freezing. The toilet was out in the backyard. The windows in the attic, it was 3 stories, had no glass in them, and the wind used to howl in at nights. And probably for about the first month or two I cried because I wanted to go back to the Dunkern Gardens, and I couldn't understand why. But this was due to the upsurge in violence that was taken between the Protestant and the Catholic traditions at this time. And us young people growing up on that, well, we had no say really in the matter. So that's what I was born into. I was sent to Sunday school at a very early age. My mum and Dad didn't really go to church. In fact, I can't remember them going to church, but they always forced us to go to church. And I started off, I was in the Robins and the BB. My sisters were in the GB, so we were sort of forced to go to these church services and so on. I didn't particularly like the services, but I liked the football. The BB played football, and I used to go there and and enjoy the football. They had the 15th BB had a good football team, and the guys that took us, Dennis Nickel and so on, were very strict and stern with us. But if you went to church on a Sunday morning and went to Sunday school, there was a better chance that you'd get picked for the football. Some might say that's bribery, but maybe it was bribery that worked for me. So I guess at an early age I heard the gospel in Sunday school. You know, they used to tell little stories about Jesus and how he died for us, and I never paid much attention to that because there was absolutely no Christians in our home at all. My father was a heavy drinker, and my mother worked in a pub as a landlady in a pub. She served a beer, and so both of them were out most days and most nights drinking, and my mum didn't get home till late because sometimes she had to lock up the bar, and by the time she got everyone out, my dad hung around with her, and they would have stayed behind for a little drink before they came home. So as an early child, I was probably in bed before they got home. But as I got older, in the circles that I grew up with, it was instilled into us a blinded hatred for Catholics, and I didn't fully understand why I hated these people. I was just told, you're in Tigers Bay, you're a Protestant, you're a loyalist, and these people are trying to remove you. These are the people that put you out of your flat up in the Dunkirk Gardens and forced you to change school and forced you to move in here, so you've got to hate them. And I was blinded by this hatred, which led to a lot of trouble. So the recreation was rioting, the recreation was throwing petrol bombs and so on, and even at an early age I was being arrested by the police. And at that time the police, rather than charge you, would have brought you home to your parents. Mum and dad would have give off to me, maybe beat me in many ways, but you just kept doing the same old and the same old, and you actually started to enjoy doing it. I went on like this throughout primary school, and then I went into secondary school, and I guess probably in secondary school that's when my life started to spiral out of control. My father had joined the paramilitaries, and I felt that was a good thing. I felt that was a great thing because our area, the area where we lived, was not policed by the police, but it was policed by paramilitaries. Loyalist paramilitaries policed the area. If you had a problem, you didn't phone the police, you went to the paramilitaries, and if they couldn't sort it out, then the police couldn't sort it out. And furthermore, if you went to the police, then you were classed as a tout, and the danger was that you would be put out of your community. It seems bizarre, but that's the culture that I was brought up in, and the culture you're brought up in can shape your whole mindset, and it can be very dangerous. But as I went into secondary school, my mother at that time wanted me to sort of better myself. She knew I had some understanding, some brains, but I didn't want to use them because I was getting into trouble. I was ratting, I was running with the boys and having what I deemed to be a great old time. Around about as I went into first year, even in P7, I was starting to indulge into taking alcohol, so I was drinking alcohol, and then we started to sniff glue, and we were getting a great kick out of that. And I was very young at this time. I was just becoming a teenager. And when I went in, my mum sent me to the boys' model school, and she thought this is a great achievement because the other school was Mount Collier, and as far as my mum was concerned, the boys' model was a little bit further up the ladder of excellency than Mount Collier. Of course, all my friends went to Mount Collier, so naturally I rebelled against going to the boys' model. I rebelled against my mother, I rebelled against my father. I felt a huge injustice had been done on me because I wasn't in the same school as my friends. These friends who went from primary school into secondary school, and my mum had taken me in a different direction. I understand now she was trying to do what would have been good for me, but when you're caught up in that spiral of hatred and confusion, you're not in any fit state of mind to make decisions for your life. So what happened was, after about 6 months in the boys' model, Ernie Davies was the headmaster at this time. He expelled me for assaulting a guy. I was a very small young man, but I viciously assaulted a guy using a weapon which I shouldn't have done. I regret that now, but I was just angry. Angry at life, angry at what had happened to me, angry at the school had been sent to, angry at my parents, and angry at everything and anybody. And when I was expelled, Ernie Davies tried to contact my parents and couldn't get them. Back then there was no mobile phones, and you were fortunate enough if you had a phone in the house. So what they done was they sent a letter out. So I carried on going to school even though I was expelled. So I didn't go to school. I sort of went and hid in the park and done other stuff, and eventually got the letter. I kept watching for the postman, and then one day I asked him, is there any mail? I'm going home, and he gave me it, and there was a letter for the school. So I was able to take it and rip it up and get rid of it. And probably after about 3 months, then an officer came to the house, a truant officer came to the house and wanted to know why I wasn't registered in a school. And that's when my mother found out that I'd been expelled. I then went to Mount Collier, to be interviewed by Geordie Parr to see if I was fit to get into Mount Collier, and I thought this was great. My mum thought it was a disaster, but I get into Mount Collier. And when I get into Mount Collier, I sort of went from bad to worse. By this time I was getting into trouble almost every day of the week, doing silly stuff, taking drink, then going to school the next morning and not really realizing what I was learning, not interested in learning. I was being expelled, suspended from school. I was put out of class into another class and forced to look at the back wall and wasn't allowed to look at the other pupils in the class. This was a continuum, and then I was put out of class continually. I was in an A stream, and then they put me into a C stream to discipline me. Then they put me with James Thomas, science teacher, to sit with him for a couple of months. But I was continually getting in trouble, and there seemed to be no cessation of what was taking place. The police were constantly arresting me. I always seemed to get caught, but I kept escaping because of my age. At the age, probably I would say in second year, it was probably then I met a girl called Martine, and we started to go out together. Her mum and dad at that time didn't really want me. Well, in fact, they didn't want me going out with her, because you wouldn't have wanted me to go out with your daughter either. I was nothing but trouble. And at that time there was a new phase went round. There was a phase of skinheads and a phase of mods, and I became a skinhead. I became a Nazi. I became a member of the National Front. I became a guy who hated not only Catholics but blacks and Jews and everything else. If you weren't a skinhead and you weren't white and you weren't loyalist, then you didn't deserve to be around. So from one spiral of confusion and hatred, I delved into an even deeper spiral of confusion and hatred, and I thought I had arrived. There was a group of us who were skinheads, sometimes 50 or 60 of us. I would say that at that age, what it did do, if anything, it kept us from joining the paramilitaries. I actually hated the paramilitaries because the paramilitaries hate me. On more times than enough, the UDA gave me a punishment beating. The UVF gave me a punishment beating. They put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger. I had umpteen engagements with these guys that were negative, so I absolutely detested them, and becoming a skinhead for me was a saving venture in many respects because it had kept me from these people. So I carried on as a skinhead, and with that came the house parties and the football matches and the National Front parties, and more trouble, more arrest, and now I was being taken to court because I reached that age of 16, 17 where I was being charged and for assaults and disorderly behaviour and burglaries and petrol bombing, and all of this stuff was now mounting up on me. But for some reason I kept escaping jail. And that was the wrong signal to send to me, because every time I walked out of court, I thought I was invincible and I possibly couldn't be touched. I was still going with my girlfriend at that time, Martine. My own mother used to tell her to leave me, that I was no good for her. That's my own mother. At that time, I was very annoyed at what everyone was saying about me, and how they were treating me. But I have to say, looking back, they were correct in what they were saying about me, because I was no good. I was bad news. I was trouble. So everything they were saying about me back then, even though I was annoyed at them saying it, looking back now, they were 100% correct in what they were saying. I then became somewhat suicidal. I attempted to take my own life because I just hated myself. And if you can't love yourself, what hope is there? I just began to fall to pieces. I was taking drugs, I was taking glue, homebrew, patching, tablets, anything I could get. I was just putting them into my body to get this high, to escape reality. When I was leaving school, they actually threw me out of school. I left with no qualifications at all. They were glad to see me go. I remember Mr. Shanks, our PE teacher, saying to me, "Young man, you'll never do anything with your life. You're an absolute waste of space." Now, if a teacher said that today, you'd maybe sue them, but he was right. At that time, he was 100% right in what he was saying about me, because I had no hope. I left school, got a job, worked in Lang's building site, lasted about 2 months, quit it, went on to the dole, and began to drink, take drugs, tablets, glue, going to parties, getting arrested over and over and over and over again. And that's when the UVF and the UDA were really trying to get me. I believe they wanted to just eliminate me, remove me. I was dodging them like I was dodging a bullet, and that's the reality of it. I was trying to escape, trying to get away, and I kept escaping them. I was staying in different people's houses. I was still going with my girlfriend. Her mum and dad we used to have to meet in secret, because her mum and dad didn't want me anywhere near her either. Her mum wasn't too bad, her dad more so would never let me into the house. But we continued going together. And then, of course, Drumcree happened, the Anglo-Irish Agreement happened, and when that all kicked off, that's when I was immersed in ratting like I'd never ratted before, and to such a stage where I racked up 44 charges. I had 44 charges, and Trevor Smith was the solicitor, and he said to me, "Brian, bring a little bag with you, son, because you're going to jail for a few years." And I remember going up onto the Crumlin Road, and I had this little bag with me, and I'm standing behind the dock, and they read these 44 charges out, and they were all ratting and petrol bombing, and I'll never forget the judge looking down at me, and he had glasses, and he leaned the glasses down, and he looked at me and says, "Young man, you probably can't see this, but I see something in you." And I thought this guy was on glue, because I couldn't see. I hated myself. "I'm going to give you a year's probation." And I looked and thought, really? I had this little bag beside me, ready to go into the cells. The police couldn't believe it. They're looking at the judge, thinking has he got the right case in front of him? But he had, and I got a year's probation. And you might think that would be a wake-up call, but for me it was a reason to party. I came flying out of the jail, straight down to the wine store, got bottles of wine, and got absolutely blootered to celebrate my invincibility, that even the courts couldn't put me away. And again, everything was going out of control. And then something happened. My mum was asked to go to a Sami workman mission in White Abbey, Rathcoole, a little playing field in Rathcoole, by her friend Mita. And she went to that mission and became a Christian. She gave her life to Jesus. She couldn't wait to get home and tell us, but remember this, I'm an angry young man, and when she came in to tell me, I was very abusive to her, because I didn't believe in God. If there was a God, He hadn't done anything for me, even though I'd done all the damage myself. And I told her in explicit language to keep her Christianity to herself and don't witness about Jesus to me, because he's done nothing for me. But my mum was this type of woman who couldn't stop evangelizing, couldn't stop telling people about Jesus, couldn't stop praying for me and inviting me to church. And it got to a stage where I was so angry that one time she came in and she just told me that I needed to get saved, and if I didn't get saved I was lost, I was going to go to hell, and that my life was a mess. And I was so angry that I put all the windows in the house, and she had to phone the police for me. And when the police came, I got up onto the roof and started to break the slates up and threw the slates down at the police. There was about 4 or 5 police Land Rovers and dogs, and the people in the street were egging me on, cheering me on, and I thought this was great. And that was just due to my mum witnessing to me. I exploded inside because of the anger that I was dealing with. I was arrested for that, and then of course my mum refused to press charges. I didn't get done for riotous behaviour, and because the slates didn't hit any of the police Land Rovers or police, they didn't charge me with anything, which was strange. I don't think they would do that today. However, to move on, I remember probably the most poignant moment in my life was when my mum came in and asked could she speak to us, and I thought, here we go again. She's going to witness to me about Jesus. And my mum looked at me and said, I have cancer. And I thought, what? And I immediately thought, where is your God? Why would he let you get cancer? Because my mum was a lovely woman. She done the best she could for me. I was a rebel without a cause. And I remember leaving the room and slamming the door and getting up and crying. Crying for the first time, because I probably realised how much I loved my mum and depended on my mum, and if anything happened to her, what was going to happen to me. That's the selfishness in you when you're bound down with hatred and sectarianism. That's the selfishness. But my mum continued to pray, and the church prayed for her. And probably about a couple of months after that, something incredibly remarkable happened. My dad gets saved. My sister gets saved. I think my sister gets saved before my dad, but I'm thinking they're ganging up on me. I remember my dad was, he used to collect the loyalist prisoners' money, so the UDA would have sent him out with a box to go around all the shops and collect all the money. And he used to do it every Saturday, and when he became a Christian they made him go around with a box because they wanted to watch him. They knew he was an alcoholic, and that if he could do the box without taking a drink, then there's a good chance he probably is real about his Christianity. My dad just couldn't stop drinking. I can hardly remember him sober at this time. But I remember on a Saturday that I was a devil. If ever was a devil in me, it was the devil. I remember my mum was sitting in the front room at about 4 o'clock waiting on him coming home, and I kept saying to her, sure, you know he's not coming, he's going to the bar. Why would he come? He's an alcoholic, he loves his drink, he's never going to come here. And I was terrible to my mum, and my mum had tears in her eyes, and I was pushing and pushing and pushing. And then it was like a rebuke from God, because the next moment I lifted up my eyes and my dad came walking up the path, and for the first time in years he was sober, and I was angry. Isn't that strange? I was angry that my dad was sober and saved. Why would someone be angry? That just tell you that to let you see how I mixed up I was in here. And I stormed out of the house. I got in serious trouble. And then the next main event in my life was I used to go to bed with my clothes on. People say to me, why did you go to bed with your clothes on? Well, if the police were coming to arrest me, and they usually came about 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, if you were lying in your underpants or whatever you got on, that's the way they were taking you, and I wanted to make sure I was dressed for them taking me into a cell. So I used to go to bed with my jeans and my t-shirt on and leave my slippers at the side of the bed. And my mum was going through chemotherapy and been very sick, and this night I heard the thud of the door, and I knew, oh, here we go, it's the police. So I sort of straightened myself up, and I just sat up in bed, got my slippers on, and by that time they come running up the stairs, burst in the door, turned me round, grabbed me, handcuffed me. You're under arrest. Give me a few knees where it hurt, and then forced me down the stairs. And I remember getting to the bottom of the stairs and looking up, and my mum comes out, and she had been losing her hair, and the police stopped, and my mum looked down and got down on her knees on the top of the stairs, and she cried out, Lord, please save our Brian. Please save our Brian. And for the first time in my life, conviction hit me like an arrow. I was speechless, absolutely speechless. The police took me and questioned me, released me, and I came home, and I have to say, after that night, after my mum prayed that prayer, I never slept for months. I never slept. Conviction, I didn't know it was conviction. I was having dreams, visions. I had fear. Fear was enveloping me. Anger was spilling out of control. I was drinking and trying to, and hoping that if I took more drink and tablets and drugs that I might be able to sleep. But it didn't matter what it took. I couldn't sleep. I then cut my wrists. They rushed me into hospital. I then overdosed. They took me in and they pumped me out. Because I couldn't get peace. I was looking for peace, and I just couldn't get peace. I couldn't see any future. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I was very concerned and couldn't do a thing about it. And shortly after that, I remember that probably the best way to put it was my girlfriend Martine at the time, incidentally, who's now my wife, believe it or not, we used to go down and see a friend called Hugh Knocker in Carrickfergus, and we used to go down there every Christmas or every New Year, just because I knew him for years and we were friendly, and we used to go down and maybe have a little drink and a little chat. And I remember this night, it was on the 17th of January, or sorry, the 18th of January. And I'm sitting in Hugh's house with Martine and his wife Sylvia, and Hugh was a backslider. And what I mean by that was he was a Christian who had fallen back into the world. So he's sitting here having a glass of wine with me, and he said to me, Brian, I'm very worried about you. And I said, Hugh, what do you mean you're worried about me? I thought, my goodness, I'm listening to all this nonsense with my mum and my dad, and now here we go, he's going to start. I says, why are you worried about me, Hugh? He says, Brian, can I ask you a question? And I was 19 at this time. I said, ask away. And he said, and he was a good friend, by the way, he was a good friend. He said to me, Brian, where are you going to be in 5 years? And I looked at him. No one had ever asked me that before. I might have been asked it as a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? But at 19, this man asked me, where am I going to be in 5 years? And I couldn't answer him. I had no future. I couldn't see beyond the next week. And he looked at me and he said, Brian, I'm worried about you. The UDA are looking you. The UVF are looking you. The IRA are looking you. The IRA were looking at me because I took a big tricolour flag down off the flats. If they don't get you, you're going to end up in prison. There's only two avenues for you at the moment. It's jail or death. And I listened to him and said, Hugh, what has brought all this on? He says, I'm concerned about you. And I says, well, what should I do then, Hugh? And he says, Brian, you need to get saved, son. And I thought, please, Lord, not another one. And of course I thought at this moment, you're a hypocrite, for goodness sake. You're not even going on with God yourself, and you're telling me what to do. You're not the one to give me advice. And I looked at my girlfriend Martine and said, come on, let's go. We're going home. You, Happy New Year, Sylvia, I'll see you later. And I remember getting into the car and I'm angry at him. He's my friend. I don't want my friend to talk to me like this. I'm angry at him, and we're in the car and we're driving up the road, and we come onto the motorway to come into Belfast, and I remember the little signs were up. There was a wind blowing. It was really windy, and it's January and heavy rain, and the sign was up saying to drive at 30 miles an hour because of the crosswinds coming in off the lock. And all of a sudden I start to think, where am I going to be in 5 years? And I feels this inner voice saying to me, Brian, if you die, you're going to hell, son. And the fear of God overtook me at that moment. The fear of God. For the first time in my life, I felt that I had a decision to make. A decision to make. And I was looking for help. And there was no help. My girlfriend was driving. And at that moment, I just remember calling out from my innermost being to God. And I said, Lord, if you're out there, I am so sorry for the mess I've made of my life and what I have done on people. I pray that you'd forgive me. And if you're real, change me. Because I can't change myself. I can't stop drinking myself. I can't stop smoking myself. I can't stop taking drugs and tablets myself. I can't rid myself of the sectarianism and the hatred. You save me. And all I can say is at that moment, I felt this overwhelming peace flowing right through me. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that at that moment in that car, God had saved me. My life had been changed. I was gobsmacked. Silence until I got about 100 yards from the house, and I turned to Martine and said to Martine, Martine, you know, I'm not going to be suicidal anymore. I'm not getting up to get a bottle of drink first thing in the morning anymore. And she thought I was going to kill myself. She is thinking, here we go again. And I said to her, I need to tell you something. She says, what is it, me? I've just got saved. I've given my life to Jesus. And she was gobsmacked. I always say it's the only night she didn't give me a good night kiss. She got me out of the car and drove off. And I remember I could see things differently. Everything was different. I remember going into the house and my mum, who's still battling cancer, sitting on the sofa, and I said, Mum, I've got something to tell you. And she started to cry. And right there at that moment, it's the first moment ever in my life when I realized the pain and the hurt I was causing my mother. At that moment when she started to cry, she was expecting bad news, because that's what I was. Bad news. That's what I brought. Bad news, hurt, pain, and everything that comes along with that. And my mother wasn't expecting anything else from me. And I looked at her and said, Mum, it's not bad. It's good. I've just got saved. And I'll never forget my mum. My mum cried and got up and hugged me. My dad come running in. He says, what did I just hear there? I said, I've got saved. And he run out of the house to tell his friends. And it was the best experience in my life as a young man at 19. I didn't know anything about God. I'd never read the Bible. I had no education. And I felt, oh God, this is real. I remember getting up the next morning. I remember getting the next morning I got up. I remember coming down and emptying all the beer and the vodka and breaking up all the cigarettes and the dope and the drugs and flushing them all and binning them all. And that was me clean. The very next morning after that, I'm in bed. I'm trying to read the Bible, and my door comes in and the police come up and they arrest me. But now it's different. I'm a Christian now. I'm only a 2-day Christian, but I'm a Christian. And someone had given me, I think my dad or Sammy Best or something, to give me a little New Testament, and I brought it with me. And I remember going to the police station, and this is how God starts to move. They put me into the cells, and then they began to interview me and accused me of a £17,000 jewellery robbery. And at the moment of the robbery, it's the only time that I had an alibi, when I was in a pensioner's house doing some electrical work for her. And I got to thinking, after that, any other time I wouldn't have had an alibi because I would have been drunk out of my head and wouldn't have remembered. But I'm sitting thinking, God, you've planned ahead. You knew this was going to happen, and I had an alibi. And when they went and checked it, they released me without charge. I was arrested 3 times in the same week by different police stations, but I wasn't concerned. I was floating. The first morning, I should have said when I got up, I want to tell you this story. This is so important. The first morning I got up at 6 o'clock to go with my dad to a prayer meeting, and it was in the Presbyterian church. And I remember going into that church, and to tell you a little bit about it, when we lived in Rebina Street, when I come up past that church on a Sunday morning, I was out all night, and a Saturday night, this skinhead with the bleached jeans and the DM boots, all these Christians used to go in, and I could see them looking at me, and because I'm filled with hatred, I'm thinking they're looking at me with scorn. They're looking at me with hatred, so if they hate me, I'm going to hate them. And we got evil eye I used to give them as I was walking past, and now I'm going to the prayer meeting. What I did do on that church was, because I hated them so much, I got up and took the lead off the roof. I stripped the lead off the roof to get money for alcohol and caused a leak to come into one of the meeting rooms. So now I'm at the prayer meeting, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and the Reverend Reverend Conkey's there. He's a minister, a godly man, and I'm in the prayer meeting, and I'm watching all these people praying. I'm trying to work it out, but all of a sudden I'm feeling conviction now, you see, for the first time. All of a sudden I feel convicted because I've took the lid off this roof. The very room that the prayer meeting is in is the room I took the lid off the roof. My goodness gracious me. And they want me to sit in a prayer meeting like this, and I'm sweating. The sweat's breaking on my brow, and I was never as glad to see a prayer meeting finish. And as we finished, I said, I'm so convicted. I said to the Reverend Conkey, can I speak to you? He says, what is it, Brian? I says, I need to tell you something. I took the lid off your roof and caused all the damage to that room. I need to pay it back. And I remember him looking at me, and he said this to me, and this almost melted my heart also. I know you took it, Brian. And I looked at him and said, you knew? Yes. And then I said, why didn't you get the police? He says, well, Jesus got you. That's much better. I couldn't believe it. These Christians were actually praying for me. They knew I took the lid off the roof, and they were praying for me. I went home and I was absolutely wrecked. God was so gracious. I had stolen property in my home. I took it all down to the police, handed it in. They told me to take myself off and not bring anything else down, but I wanted to get rid of everything. I wanted a clean slate. I then got a job. I started to work as I should say that my wife and I, my girlfriend there, Martine, got saved about 30 minutes after me. So now I was allowed into her home because I was a Christian. Remarkable, isn't it? The same police that were putting her car in when she was driving me and searching the car and pulling me out. These same police now, when we got flat tires, were putting up to the car and getting their jacks out and fixing our bunchers. Only Jesus can do that change. And I remember, it's incredible, I remember I got this job, and then I walked out of it because I didn't like it. It was a fettling job, fettling basis for generator, and I walked along the road and straight into another job in a door lifts and escalators. A friend of mine got me a job in there, and I worked in there for a good few years. My mum died of cancer. That was a difficult time. I lost my mum, but I was strong in God. I kept going on with God. I worked away as a lift engineer's mate, then a lift engineer, then a service engineer. I left the doors and joined the Otis Elevator Company as a service engineer, and then I went from a service engineer in Otis Elevator Company to the manager, to a service manager's position. And I look at all that and say, that's God. Only God done that. I was a wreck. I was broken. I was a disaster. God saved me, and God was putting my feet on the path that He wanted me to go down. And I remember even looking at my life, I'd asked Martine to marry me. She made me go in and ask her dad, which absolutely petrified me. I remember going in and asking, I'm saying, Ali, can I have your daughter's hand in wife? And he said to me, if you'd have came here 4 years ago to chase you down the stairs, but such a change in your life now, I'd be happy to have you as a son-in-law, and I couldn't believe that, because no one had ever said this about me. This was a change that Christ had made. I was encouraged by people in my life. Alan Gibson, who was a youth leader, encouraged me. Clark Mills, another lovely man of God, who encouraged me. All of a sudden, all these people were coming around me, and they were all encouraging me. My pastor, Pastor Robert Scott, who ruled with a rod of iron, but I needed that. He mentored me and helped me. There were so many people that poured into my life and into Martine's life, and we planned to get married, and we were excited about that, and we eventually got married, and it was a great day. Obviously, we got married. We then had a daughter, Michelle, and then our second daughter was born, and we knew something was seriously wrong. We had Jessica. And Jessica was born with severe brain damage. She needs 24-hour care continually. My wife Martine's a victim of the Troubles. The British Army run over her and she lost her leg. So we have a house of disability. But we had God. I remember when Jessica was diagnosed that her dad, Martine's dad, asked me a question because he wasn't a Christian. Brian, why, if you're Christians, does all this happen to you? And I looked at him and said, Alec, well, look, if we weren't Christians, what would we do? We'd go to a bottle, we'd go to drugs, we'd go to glue, our marriage would fail. If God was not in it, we would never survive. And that was the reality, that was the truth. And we had another daughter, Rebecca, who was fine, and I continued on working for Otis. And then I enrolled in a degree. I asked Otis, would they pay to do a degree in theology? And they did. I done a degree in theology. And round about that time, I remember working in a lift motor room, and the Spirit of God spoke to me and said to me, Brian, what are you doing here? And I thought, well, I'm fixing a lift. No, what are you doing here? It was that moment God was telling me, this isn't going to be your career. I thought I'd arrived. I was a service manager. I had a company car, a company phone, a company credit card, big money, flying over to London, flying to France. I thought I'd arrived. And now all of a sudden God's telling me, this isn't going to be your destination. I have to say that I used to pray to God, God, you've given me everything I have. If I ever have to give it all up for you, I'll do it in a blink, because it's not mine, it's yours. You've made it possible. And there at that moment I feel the Spirit of God speaking to me. And from there I entered into the ministry. I remember leaving Otis, and they were so good to me. I can't say, they were a brilliant company to work for. Anyone who's worked for Otis Elevator Company will know that. They were brilliant to work for. They bought me a Bible. They wished me well. They kept in contact with me. We had a great time, and I went into the ministry. I've been in the ministry now, my goodness, a good few years, too long to count. I'm pastoring. I'm enjoying it. I love people. I'm also working as the Teen Challenge leader for Northern Ireland, reaching those in drugs, those who are broken. And I look back at my life and I think, my goodness gracious me, where I was and where I am now is not through any philosophy. It's not through any counselling, psychiatric works or medication. It's the raw power of the Holy Ghost. It's God who seen me as a 19-year-old broken man, rescued me, picked me up from the miry clay, put my feet on a rock, and caused me to love people. Caused me to love people, whether they're black, white, Protestant, Catholic, just to love them the way He loved me. And I've been doing that for 33 years. When I was first saved, I remember coming out of the police station and they were singing, let's all gather at the river. This is the policemen telling me I would last 6 months. That was 33 years ago. And I haven't kept myself. I've been kept by the power of God. And I love Jesus with all of my heart. I owe Him my everything. And if you don't know Jesus, if your life's a mess, believe me, it couldn't have been worse than mine. If your life's a mess, turn to the Saviour. He can rescue you just like He rescued me. I just wanted to share this little testimony. I've left a whole lot out. It would take me hours to do it all. And I know when I finish this, I'll be thinking, you should have said this, you should have said that. But I've said what the Spirit wanted me to say. If you need to talk to me, drop me an email, pastorbrianmadden@me.com. Pastor Brian Madden. That's BrianMadden @me.com. Drop me an email. I'm here to help you, pray for you, but only He can save you. He is lovely. He is worthy to be praised. And I thank the Lord Jesus Christ for rescuing me, rescuing my wife, rescuing my family, and putting me in the ministry. God bless you. I hope you enjoy this. Give Him all the glory, not me. Give Him all the glory. Praise His wonderful name.